Hey, everybody out there in the Bosshole Transformation Nation, welcome to the Bosshole Chronicles. This is John Brewer, and I am simply introducing this week's episode, which is hosted by my partner and friend, Sarah Best. This week, Sarah sits down with Marcel Schwantes from Leadership from the Core. That's the name of his company. And also, he's the host of the Love in Action podcast. By the way, check the show notes. We will have all of those links in there for you. But let me tell you a little bit about Marcel. Marcel's remarkable work around servant leadership and helping to reshape the way we think about managing and developing people can be found in his work as an international speaker, executive coach, and a syndicated columnist attracting over 1.5 million readers every single month. He's been featured in Inc., Time, Business Insider, Fast Company, the New York Daily News, CNBC, Forbes, Chicago Tribune, and the list goes on. And what you will really hear in this interview is Marcel's passion and commitment to helping elevate the role of the manager, the role of the leader in organizations, and giving them a different perspective on what it means to show up and to serve people and develop people from a loving perspective. It's an absolutely great conversation. I'm excited for what you're about to hear, so let's let Sarah take it away. Bosshole Chronicles are brought to you by Real Good Ventures, a talent optimization firm helping organizations diagnose their most critical people and execution issues with world-class analytics. Make sure to check out all the resources in the show notes and be sure to follow us and share your feedback. Enjoy today's episode.
Welcome to the podcast, Marcel. It's so good to have you with us today.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, this is something I've really been looking forward to. As a subject matter expert, you have a different take on leadership. In fact, you talk about two powerful leadership principles that I don't know if everybody's talking about these, but they should be. Can you share what those are?
Well, everything comes from the premise of how my leadership practice and how I coach people, and even the articles I write about, even the podcast. Yes. I come from the framework of servant leadership. Yes. So if anybody's ever asked, what's Marcel really about? Well, there you go. That's my secret sauce.
Yeah.
And so for those people that are not familiar with the term servant leadership, I can't imagine why they wouldn't, but just in case, let me steer your audience in the right direction. That's a term that's been around for probably 50 years now. And it's still a little bit of a counterintuitive way of leading. And it comes from the premise that you put your employees first, even ahead of your customers. Yes. And you show your humanity by developing your people, meeting their needs. And in turn, the business case for that is that they will perform at a higher level, and that creates business impact and all of those good things that CFOs are looking for and CEOs are looking for, right? Profit, top line revenue, et cetera. So it all comes from, if you go all the way back to the beginning of this chain, it starts with leading your people and putting your people first. So that's what right. Everything comes out of that.
And I think it's in the intro to your very successful podcast, Love in Action, that it's about love and care. Those principles, right, when added to the repertoire of becoming the framework of servant leadership, they're powerful. And so much so that you have interviewed upwards of 180. You have 180 episodes with multitudes of guests and very, very accomplished people in the world of leadership, talking with you about love in action. Yeah. Can I ask this question then? I mean, we've been talking about servant leadership for decades. We've been investing lots of money in leadership development. What is getting in the way of leaders, managers, supervisors, bosses, potential boss holes? What's getting in the way for people not being able to show that love and care?
Well, two things. Well, first is belief, right? So you have come from the belief, the mindset that love and care works. And you have to be able to see love in a practical sense as a true business value. And that kind of speaks to the article that you saw on LinkedIn, right? Seeing love as a business value. But I think that the mistake that we make is that we identify and place in people in leadership roles that don't have the actual leadership skills to inspire and motivate human beings at the core of who they are. And so I think that goes back to centuries. Well, I wouldn't say centuries, but multiple decades
yes.
of leading through power and greed and self-interest, which really comes from the industrial age that we grew up in, with seeing business as more about the people at the top of the chain and not about the workers on the front lines. And so I think we've held on to these relics of the industrial age, and we've passed it on from generation to generation. But after COVID, we're seeing that we're starting to kind of break the chain now, and we're starting to stop the cycle. I mean, that's why I bring guests on the show to talk about how love and care is really making an impact on how businesses are run these days.
Absolutely. And the article, by the way, that we're referring to, we'll make sure we put a link to that article. You have a very popular Future of Leadership newsletter on LinkedIn that our listeners should definitely tune into. This one in particular is called 2 Hard Lessons That Will Speed Up Your Leadership Growth. And it's short and sweet, but it packs a powerful punch there. That's from February of 2023. It's a mindset. And I think you just talked about the business value of love. Help us understand the second point, which is you have to build trust. We know that's ever elusive. What do we do?
Well, I talk again. I think the mindset leads to this understanding that to lead well, you have to create trust, and in these days, trust starts with looking at your people and releasing yourself from the control and I think I mentioned the term positional authority, because again, we come from that place where the leader's supposed to be large and in charge, right? Mm-hmm. And we're supposed to have all the answers. And so in order to build trust, you have to create the kind of environment where people contribute their voice, their creativity, and where you maybe step back a little bit and help to foster an environment where you share your leadership, right? Mm-hmm. And so especially, these days, workplaces are more virtual. And so it would make sense if you're, a leader, a CEO, even a middle manager, to rely on the expertise of the people on the front lines, because they may know more than you do. Right. If they are interfacing with your customers every day. They know what's going on, right? And so it would create more impact, I think, if a leader started to trust. Here's a trust piece, right? Trust their employees. But there's research out there, and I talked to Stephen M. R. Covey, and I brought him on the show. He's written the book, The Speed of Trust, and that we have to kind of release that expectation that people have to prove their worth to us, or they have, that we have to basically sit back and say, well, I need them to give me a reason to trust them. And Stephen M. R. Covey's research is basically saying that we have to extend trust as a gift and give that to people, right? So it's that understanding that we hired people, we should believe that they have the capacity to do the work and do it well. We should believe and trust in their ability to use their brain. Yeah. To make decisions on their own, right? Without us having to look over their shoulder all the time. And so that's the premise of trust. Starts with leaders, starts with us extending it as a gift and not holding it over them to say, well, you have to prove yourself first before I trust you. No. What if we kind of flip that around to say, well, I trust you because I believe in you, right?
Well, and if we look at trust that way, which I think is fantastic, that means leaders have to be probably willing to give something up. And so trust as a gift, trust as a choice means that we're going to have to potentially let go of control, let go of the need to look good, let go of the need to, and I mean, we still talk about self-awareness as a key to strong leadership. How many individuals just aren't even aware of what's driving, their behavior or their unwillingness to trust people? We want people to more deeply understand that so that they can give that gift more freely.
Exactly. And I think that, if I may use the boss hole as a term, and
Yes.
most boss holes are actually what they're doing is they're acting out of fear that they're going to lose power by giving it away.
Right.
And the flip side is that if they actually give away their power, it increases collaboration, and people are much more willing to then trust that leader to say, hey, you know what, my boss actually is asking me for an opinion on this decision. Well, heck, if somebody came to me, if an executive or a senior leader came to me and asked for my input, and I'm an individual contributor, that creates immense value in work relationships.
Right.
I mean, it just inflates that person, and just motivates that person,
right,
to contribute at a higher level. So yeah, and I think that's really about showing your humanity. The trust piece, being able to release control,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, when you foster that across the enterprise, boy, I tell you, employee engagement in those companies that have high trust, I mean, they're voted best places to work every year. That's what it takes.
They are. And it could become, certainly could become the environment in which they work. I can't help but think about how, command and control and this decades old way that we've been operating, it tends to favor, or we talk most frequently about the leaders who are micromanagers and who have to control everything. But there's also the other type of potential boss hole. It's the one who's unavailable or absent because they're doing all this stuff and they're just not there. I've actually worked with people like that before. They're either behind a closed door, figuring it all out on their own, and then they'll just tell you what they want you to do. So I guess it still is like control, but we want people to adapt. So if my natural inclination is to say, hey, you got the picture, just go do it, and then I disappear, and you're the kind of employee or manager that needs feedback, that needs just some encouragement and some reassurance that I'm doing the right thing, that what I'm doing is meeting your expectations, that I'm not wasting time, and I'm not there to give you that feedback, that's equally frustrating and just as detrimental.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that there is this really good balance that needs to take place. Autonomy is great. We want to release the reins and give people the freedom to own decisions and work in that manner. But at the same time, those people are also waiting for us to kind of guide them along, not look over their shoulders and micromanage, like you said, but we still need leaders to kind of show the way. Right. And to attach meaning and purpose to the job, and to point people ahead to the vision and to the big picture. Right. Mm-hmm. Keep people engaged in that sense, not go MIA. And like you said, and hide behind closed doors, or even behind virtual closed doors these days. Right. Where you don't even hear from your boss over Zoom or Slack, and you don't know what's going on. And then they pop up and tell you that, there's a new direction that all of a sudden has sprung up on employees. And now employees are wondering, well, how come they didn't tell us this before? And now I have to shift gears. And so that creates disengagement in people. People don't feel like their opinion matters. Right. If there's a drastic change in direction, I mean, you have to keep people abreast of what's going on, set expectations, reset expectations, because as we've learned from COVID, things are in a constant state of change, right? There's a lot of uncertainty going on. So people need to know what's going on. Mm-hmm. And I think that speaks to what we're talking about here.
And doesn't it seem kind of simple that, as changes are being contemplated and decisions are being made to make changes, that we would learn that everybody's a little bit different in how they deal with change. Some people need a little more runway. They need a little more time to get their arms around the why. Other people are pretty unflappable and pretty fast paced and agile. And, it really doesn't take them much to understand a new direction or even to move in that new direction. But there are a fair amount of people, we'd suggest maybe 62% or more of the population just need to know why. And they need to know, well, everybody probably needs to know why, but they need to know, what does it mean for me? So this is what I know. This is what I do. So this is totally different. What you're putting out here takes me to a different place that's not familiar. What do I do with what I know? What do I do with what I've been doing? And how do we move toward that? I don't know. That right there could be a whole episode unto itself. But the change is hard. In your article, you also talk about involving others and learning from others. I think there's some gold in there too. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, I think involving others is, we've heard the term psychological safety. I think now it's an overused buzz term, right? That Amy Edmondson in her research. And I think that when you involve others, you allow risks to be taken, right? So you're basically pumping the fear out of the room and creating a safe environment for people to express their opinions, creativity, even if they have to push back. The humble leader, the servant leader that leads through love and care allows for healthy friction, constructive criticism to take place, because I mentioned, you may not have all the answers. So you want to listen to the input of those individual contributors around you who may have something really good to say that you haven't considered. But you can't do that if there's no trust in place, and if you're not involving others in in voicing their expressions, creativity, opinions, etc. So I think that speaks to the psychological safety that has to take place before people will have the natural inclination to speak up. Because in most environments, if it's a fear-based pressure cooker environment, nobody's going to speak up. They're afraid of the boss, right? There's fear there. Yeah.
They really are. You said something really powerful, though, and I want to draw back to it: mitigating risk. So one of the key ways to develop psychological safety would be to intentionally go about reducing the risk of fear and retaliation and retribution and the fear of looking bad, reducing that risk by elevating our conversations and our celebration of, for example, mistakes. We actually interviewed Dr. Amy Edmondson back in January. We'll also put a link to that episode in the show notes. But I think you're onto something there, that psychological safety has to kind of be the soil or the medium in which trust takes place. And I mean, if we think that's magically going to happen, we're missing the boat. I've heard a lot of leaders too get frustrated and say, well, it's on them if they don't tell me. Well, I would disagree. What do you say about that, Marcel?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to Amy's point in her research, when you mentioned this a while back, it may be going back to even Brene Brown's work on vulnerability, is that when you allow the space for yourself to be vulnerable, to say, hey, I messed up, guys. Okay, I made the wrong choice here. It communicates that you're a human being and you make mistakes, but you allow for other people to say, you know what? Wow. In this environment, it's okay for me to say, hey, boss, I made a mistake too on this, because the boss is modeling that kind of vulnerability. Yeah. And so that's how you mitigate the risk, is you create that psychologically safe environment. And I think that also speaks to creating a stronger team atmosphere. Yep. When the boss is saying, okay, hey, you know what? Let's be real with one another. Mistakes are going to be made. Yeah. Raise your hand as I'm the first one to say that I've made lots of mistakes and I'll probably make other mistakes. And I want you to know that you shouldn't fear your job if you make a mistake. We are here to learn from our mistakes, right? Fail forward. Yeah. And that we're all in this together. If we're going to grow as a team and grow our business, we're going to hit those spots where we may not be sure of what to do next, and we may, take a wrong step. But in doing that, let me just assure you,
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Leaders or Miss Leader is saying, let me just assure you that you are not going to be reprimanded for that. In fact, that's who we are as a team, and so you want to create that as maybe an organizational value.
Absolutely. All right. We'll be right back.
With employee disengagement at its highest level in 9 years, your company can't afford to miss the mark when it comes to optimizing your hiring, management, and team performance practices. At its lowest level, employee turnover costs you $11,000 per person, and those are dollars you can easily save with the right set of people analytics. Real Good Ventures is a talent optimization consultancy specializing in world-class analytics specific to your people and the critical role they play within your organization. Gain confidence in your hiring practices, keep the boss holes from driving your talent away, design your teams for flawless execution, and create a culture that offers meaning and fulfillment. Real Good Ventures has a family of validated diagnostic tools specific to the human aspect of business, because we know that all business issues are people issues. Visit us today at www.realgoodventures.com and bring meaning and fulfillment back into your workplace.
Okay, let's get back to the program. I just think about, gosh, it's even hard to apologize to my husband, which I probably have to do very often. Saying I'm sorry, saying I screwed up, it sounds good, and if we could talk about it, I know I can talk about it easily in conversations like this, but actually doing it is a whole nother thing. It's a little more challenging. It's scary.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It takes a great amount of humility, and I think that the humility and psychological safety are close cousins. I don't know if you've had Gary Ridge on your show. I've spoken to him, former CEO of the WD-40 company, and he told me, Marcel, the three greatest lessons or the three greatest words that I will ever share with my workers is this. I said, okay. He goes, it's I don't know. Mm-hmm. It's removing yourself from this sort of the ivory tower of I have all the answers. Yeah. To kind of acknowledge to your employees that, hey, I'm human like everyone else. So don't look at me as this leader with the cape blowing in the wind, mm-hmm. right? As this larger than life figure that has all together. So again, we bring ourselves down to a more vulnerable and humble space for other people to say, whew, yeah, my boss is human and I can be too. Right. So I can admit I don't know all the answers as well.
Right.
Because my boss is modeling that for us. And not knowing all the answers, to Gary's point, he says what he meant by I don't know is that now we can figure out together. We can figure out the answers together as a team, and relying on the collective wisdom of everyone in the room to go and find a solution to a problem.
And I mean, if you think about I know the kind of leadership teams we work with, there's some pretty smart people around those tables, some pretty fantastic, very well-read, amazing human beings. And yeah, of course we can figure it out together. I have such a great example of this going on right now, working with a small manufacturing company that's just ready. They're going to explode. Their growth is going to be exponential in the next year and a half, but they know what got them here won't get them there. But it's the CEO who's willing to say, and has been very vocal about, I've not been here. I've not, there are a lot of things I've done, but to get us to this point, that we're lucky. We're lucky we're here. But I know I need to change. I know I can't keep doing, and making the decisions I've made and taking the actions I've taken in a vacuum. So that's good. And I wonder too, Marcel, you work with a lot of organizations and leaders. Do you have any good examples, or is there we talk theoretically about psychological safety and trust and being servant leaders. Any real life examples that people could take to heart?
Yeah. I mentioned a minute ago or so about organizational values. Yeah. Some companies don't really know who they are. And so as they grow and they go through all these inflection points, they lose their identity and hire the wrong people because, they're growing. So they need to fill benches and all that. But
Yes.
what the founder of that company basically had these values that were just words on the wall, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they weren't really lived out, and they realized that. And it was causing a lot of turnover and conflict, and people were creating silos and hoarding resources. And I said, that sounds like you guys don't really know how to operate by some values that are non-negotiable, where, you share those values and you hire and you promote your leaders based on those values. I said, do you know what your values are? I had the executive team on a Zoom call, and I said, tell me what your values are. Crickets in the room.
Yeah.
And because, most of the time, companies that aren't clear on their values, they're, like I said, they're just words. They're not being lived out. And so I basically went through an exercise with the executive team to have them assess what they felt their values were, and then match that up against their top performers, and then kind of create a new set of organizational values that they would operate by and hold themselves accountable to, right? And then so things like safety would come up, and trust would come up, and integrity would come, and these are the usual suspects, right? Or teamwork, right?
Right.
And so I said that these are great, but how are you going to measure these in the people that you have? So then that led to another discussion about, wow, okay, now we need to know how to assess the people that we bring in to make sure that their values now align with our new organizational values. If we're going to walk the talk, we got to make sure that we're safeguarding and protecting our newfound values, right? And I said, all right, well, okay, so let's talk about how to do that. So we created this whole selection process where, they understood how to interview and assess and workers. And then I said, okay, well, that's great. So now, how do you ensure that those values are reinforced and people are, working through those values, but also, that they're being motivated to grow and perform and even promote themselves based on those values? So that was the third tier of our discussion is, how to kind of embed that into the culture. And this was a year process, mind you. And so to me, what came out of that are a lot of the things that we've been talking about, right? Psychological safety, trust, and emotional intelligence came up because they wanted to hire people that had EQ. Okay, well, what does that look like? So we talked about that, and now they are, a couple of years down the road, they are being considered as a best place to work in their region in Ohio. They're in the manufacturing space as well. And it's great because, we talk about the world has gone remote. These guys have never gone remote because, they're out there in the front lines of the manufacturing environment and with heavy machinery and all that stuff. And so a lot of their work is face to face. And so we created the mechanism to ensure that they are a high performing organization. And I'm telling you, 90% of that was all about people skills, human skills. I don't even call them soft skills anymore. I'm taking a chapter out of Simon Sinek. He's like, no, they're not soft skills. They're human skills. That's right. These are the essential skills we need now to basically to succeed and thrive in the workplace.
Well, and that was such a great segue because I have right in front of me here on the screen the episode you recently recorded here yet in March with Carrie Charnice and Rob Holman. That stuck out to me. Leading with feeling. Carrie happens to be a guru. But I've been certainly a disciple and a student of emotional intelligence for at least 20 years. So that was a name that I became acquainted with early on. And he's gotten all kinds of accolades and been a real leader and pioneer in the EQ space. What would you say were your key takeaways from that conversation?
Boy, anytime I have a discussion on EQ, everything kind of falls back on developing self-awareness
Yes.
as sort of the bedrock for EQ. I mean, and then everything kind of follows from there, right? Like your self-motivation and your empathy. But I think to me at least, and I think a lot of what Carrie and I talked about is you have to create that capacity to be introspective, to self-reflect about who you're being and how you've operated in the past. Is it working? If it's not, then don't be on the definition of insanity, a treadmill, or doing the same thing expecting different results to happen, because you got to get off that treadmill if your behaviors are creating the same results.
That's right.
Something needs to change. So then what are you going to do? You're going to have to, step back. You have to ask for feedback. You're going to have to maybe, say, I need a 360 degree review here. Okay. And be honest with yourself. There may be blind spots that you are not aware of, that you don't even know that you don't know. And so, starts with, I think, the road to higher EQ is build your self-awareness.
It's another great segue. We are actually interviewing Tasha Urich in the next coming weeks here to talk about self-awareness. She has a great TEDx talk on self-awareness where, in her research, and I've read this in other places too, where many more of us believe we're self-aware than actually are. Yeah. And the good news and the bad news about that. But it is powerful. And I think probably in the work you do, Marcel, it's giving people context and as a coach, asking the right questions and taking their situations, but letting them go and process and think through that. And I think there's a powerful combination of feedback, whether it's 360 feedback. Certainly we're seeing a trend now too, where managers are using tools, whether they're apps or Slack or other things, to continuously get feedback from their direct reports. I mean, the bold and courageous servant leaders certainly would be hungry for that. They'd want to have some feedback. But I love where you're headed. And certainly, again, we'll put all the links to these fantastic episodes of yours and your works in the show notes. What's coming up next for you? What should we inform our listeners to look out for and be on the watch for with you?
Well, you caught me at a good time. I actually I just signed a book deal. And so it's 4 years in the making. I've worked with a literary agent, and then COVID hit and publishing houses went dark, and then I took time off. So 4 years in the making, basically. I was going to write a book in 2019 or 18 based on the principles of love and action. So it's kind of a spin on my podcast. And so now I've kind of pressed the reset button. I found a publisher, and so I'm going to start writing that book. And I'm going to. So what's next for me is I'm going to start documenting the chapters as I go in real time, and bring that to the podcast to kind of let my listeners know. Okay, here's the journey. Here's where I'm at. Here's what the research is saying, and give them a sort of like a chapter by chapter walkthrough before the book is published. And it's a great sneak preview.
Nice.
And, I have a whole year to write this thing.
Yes.
So that's really, I'm going to be spending a lot of time on that, and, talking to more people and doing more research and inspecting the research on love as a business value. And again, when we say love, we're talking about practical, actionable love and care. None of the squishy, emotional, romantic, familial love, right? We're talking about, in the truest Greek original sense of the word, it's the agape fashion of love, which is the compassionate side of love. It's the removing obstacles from people's path. It's listening more intently. It's meeting the needs of others. Those are all things that the literature has been saying has worked for 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
And again, and I trace it back to servant leadership. Because when it all boils down to it, nobody is actually calling it love. But I'll take that back. I would say 10 years ago, nobody would even use the word love in the business lexicon. Well, now that's changing, right? I keep reading more and more books where business authors are dropping the word love in there. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm just kind of tagging along and then just expanding this to really a point where we don't have to ever worry about saying, yeah, I'm a leader and I love well, I love my employees well, and so that's a long answer to your question of what's next for me.
Oh, I'm excited that we'll be able to follow along as the book comes into being. I think two things about love. One is it is the opposite of fear. So if we can appreciate, well, much like we have two train tracks, you're either on one or the other. You can't be on both at the same time. And self-awareness would help us understand if we were spending more time in the unproductive, rather toxic and unhelpful place of fear, but moving into love. Love is changing the world right now. I mean, it's definitely what's called for. It's this idea that we don't have to do huge, tremendous things. We don't have to declare, I love you. We could just listen more intently. We could take time to care for ourselves. By the way, you can't give away what you don't have. So if you're not loving on yourself and taking care of yourself, you can't do that for others. But, this is just so refreshing. And I'm just so excited that you have the momentum that you do and the followership that you do. We'll make sure that our listeners can also tune in to all the good things you have going on with Love in Action. And we'll be awaiting your book. Can't thank you enough for your time today, Marcel.
Sarah, thank you. I love having these conversations, and I know that this is the reason why you do what you do and reflects my own aspirations. I think that we need more people in this space, in media and in the podcast to really educate the public. Yes. It's still an uphill battle for every company that I can say operates by the principles of love and care. There's probably about 10 more that are fear-based, top-down command and control, toxic environments led by boss holes. So we got a lot of work to do.
Well, good job security, right? Well, thank you again, Marcel. Good luck to you. And maybe we'll have you back on when your book is ready to launch. We can do a preview for our listeners. Would you be up for that?
I would love that.
All right. Awesome. Well, keep up the great work and have a good rest of your day.
Peace out, everybody.
All right. We'll see you next time on the Bosshole Chronicles.
We'd like to thank our guest today on the Bosshole Chronicles. And if you have a Bosshole Chronicles story of your own, please email us at mystory@thebossholechronicles.com. Once again, mystory@thebossholechronicles.com. We'll see you again soon.